She was just another maid to most people, pushing a cleaning cart through polished marble hallways, invisible to the wealthy guests who passed her by. But when Amara answered her phone in flawless Dutch, everything changed. The billionaire standing across the hall turned, stunned. A black hotel maid speaking one of Europe's most difficult languages? His curiosity was instant. And so was his decision. He had to know more. Welcome to Dream Tale, where we bring you powerful true-style stories that reveal how greatness can be hidden in plain sight. If this is your first time watching, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Let me ask you this, have you ever surprised someone just by being yourself? Have you ever been underestimated, only to watch someone's expression change the moment they realized they were wrong about you? That's exactly what happened to Amara. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't showing off. She simply answered her phone, like anyone would. But the language she spoke wasn't expected from someone in her uniform. Especially not in front of a millionaire who was fluent in Dutch himself. He was used to being the smartest man in the room. But that day he learned that brilliance doesn't come with a name tag or a job title. And that respect isn't something you offer based on appearance, it's something earned through truth. In this story we'll follow Amara's quiet strength, her hidden past, and the chain of events that began with a single phone call. What started as a routine day at work quickly turned into an opportunity that would transform her life, and challenge everyone's assumptions. This isn't just a story about language. It's about identity, dignity, and the invisible brilliance that lives inside people who are so often ignored. So let's begin. Amara's day began the same as always, just before sunrise. She tied her hair back, laced her worn sneakers, and buttoned up her crisp white uniform. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean. Just like the hotel expected her to be. Just like she expected of herself. She stepped onto the city bus, head down, earbuds in, ignoring the stares of half-asleep passengers. They barely noticed her, just another black woman in uniform, heading to a job nobody envied. But Amara didn't mind the silence. She was used to being invisible. The Royal Crest Hotel stood tall and shining in the heart of the city. Its name was associated with luxury, foreign dignitaries, and multimillion-dollar contracts. Every detail was curated to perfection. And in the shadows of that perfection, Amara worked. She was one of the most efficient maids on the staff. Management loved her because she never made mistakes. She was fast, discreet, and never complained. The guests didn't know her name, but they always walked into pristine rooms that smelled of lavender and left spotless. Amara moved through the hallways with quiet precision. She had mastered the rhythm. Knock, wait, enter, clean, reset. Her cleaning cart was organized like a soldier's pack. She didn't miss a corner, didn't leave a wrinkle on a sheet. Other maids occasionally whispered and laughed during shifts, chatting about guests or complaining about the supervisors. Amara smiled politely but rarely joined in. She kept her life private, her past tucked away. It wasn't arrogance, it was survival. She had learned long ago that the less people knew about her, the fewer assumptions they made. And she was tired of being boxed in by assumptions. No one knew she spoke 5 languages. No one knew she'd once studied international relations. No one knew she'd lived in 2 continents before she was 18. Because none of that mattered when you were scrubbing toilets and vacuuming plush hotel rugs. Sometimes when she was alone in a suite, she'd pause and look out over the skyline. She didn't feel jealous. She didn't even feel sad. She just wondered how her life had taken such a detour. How someone like her, with a brilliant mind and a multicultural past, had ended up changing sheets for people who wouldn't even meet her eye in the hallway. But Amara didn't complain. She worked hard, sent money home, and kept her head down. Her life had become small, measured in square feet and shifts. Until that day. Until the phone rang and she answered without thinking. Until her words echoed through the hallway, not in English, but in flawless, native-sounding Dutch. That one call, innocent, ordinary, would be the spark that changed everything. The Royal Crest Hotel was always buzzing with important people. CEOs, foreign ambassadors, film stars. But when Richard Hallstrom checked in, the staff felt a different kind of pressure. He wasn't loud or arrogant. In fact, he was remarkably composed. But everyone knew who he was. Richard wasn't just rich, he was powerful. A global investor, fluent in 5 languages, with deep connections in European politics and technology. If he liked you, doors opened. If he didn't, well, those doors slammed shut. He had reserved the hotel's most luxurious suite for an indefinite stay. Word spread quickly among the staff. He was holding meetings with European executives, looking to expand into new markets. Every moment of his stay was meticulously watched. The concierge assigned 2 people to his floor at all times. Kitchen staff was told to be on call 24/7. Housekeeping was instructed to stay invisible unless summoned. And yet, it wasn't power that made Richard intimidating. It was the way he noticed everything. He could walk past you once and remember your name, your accent, even your posture. He was known for his ability to read people in seconds, and act accordingly. Amara didn't think much of it when she was assigned to his floor. She'd cleaned for celebrities before. They never spoke to her. Never noticed. Why would he be any different? That morning she was cleaning 2 doors down from his suite. It was just past 9 a.m. The hallway was quiet and she was deep in routine, checking the mini bar, fluffing pillows, tucking in the corners of the bed like she'd done 1,000 times before. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, her cousin, Peter, from Amsterdam. Without a second thought she answered. "Hello. Ik ben op het werk." "Nee, het gaat goed," she said casually, speaking in her native Dutch. Unbeknownst to her, Richard had stepped out of his suite at that exact moment. He paused mid-step, his attention caught by the sound of her voice. He didn't just recognize the language. He recognized the fluency, the tone, the rhythm, the accent. Not beginner Dutch. Not classroom Dutch. This was someone who had lived it, breathed it. He turned slowly and looked down the hall. A maid in uniform, holding a phone, speaking fluently in a language she had no obvious reason to know. Richard didn't interrupt her. He waited until she ended the call. Then, without hesitation, he turned to his assistant and said quietly, "Find out who she is. I want to speak to her. Now." It wasn't a command out of anger or authority. It was curiosity. Deep, unexpected curiosity. Because in a world where everyone tried to impress him, this woman had caught his attention by doing the opposite, by being completely herself. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But something told him she was not who she appeared to be. Amara had just tucked her phone back into her pocket when she heard footsteps, sharp, purposeful ones. She turned and saw a sharply dressed man walking toward her. He wasn't in housekeeping or management. His posture screamed authority, and the badge on his lapel read, "Executive Assistant to Mr. Richard Hallstrom." "Miss?" he asked. She straightened slightly, unsure. "Yes. My employer would like a word with you." Amara's stomach dropped. Had she broken a rule? Was she not supposed to take calls in the hallway? Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. She nodded stiffly and followed the man down the hallway, stopping just outside the grand double doors of the royal suite. The assistant knocked once, opened the door and motioned her in. The suite looked more like a private penthouse than a hotel room, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, modern furniture worth more than her yearly salary. And there, standing by the window, was Richard Hallstrom. He turned as she entered, his expression calm but unreadable. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Amara, is it?" She nodded. "Yes, sir." "You speak Dutch?" She hesitated. "Yes. It's my second language." He smiled slightly. "Not second." That sounded native. Amara blinked. No one at the hotel had ever asked her about anything beyond the linens. "I was born in Rotterdam," she replied softly. "My mother's from there." Richard motioned for her to sit. She did, cautiously, perching on the edge of an expensive leather chair. "I've spent a lot of time in the Netherlands," he said. "I recognized your dialect instantly. You studied there?" "For a while. Before I came here." "To work in hospitality?" She looked him straight in the eye. "To survive." There was no bitterness in her voice. Just truth. Richard nodded, intrigued. "You're not just multilingual, are you?" Amara shrugged. "Languages have always been easy for me." "How many?" "5. Dutch, English, French, Yoruba, and a little German." He leaned back, impressed. "And yet, you clean hotel rooms." She tilted her head slightly. "Everyone has a story, Mr. Hallstrom. Mine just hasn't been told." That answer made him pause. He studied her, and for the first time he saw past the uniform, the quiet confidence, the alert eyes, the intellect behind them. She was not some overlooked worker. She was someone who had lived, adapted, learned, and survived. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What if I wanted to hear your story?" Amara smiled faintly. "Then you'd have to listen." It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't pride. It was a challenge, a soft one. And Richard, a man used to dominating conversations, found himself doing something rare. He listened. The next morning, Amara returned to her floor, expecting everything to go back to normal. The moment she stepped off the staff elevator, she noticed something strange. Her schedule for the day had been changed. She had been assigned only one suite, Suite 2401. Richard Hallstrom's suite. Before she could question it, a message came through her hotel tablet. Report to the executive dining room at 1 p.m., Mr. Hallstrom's request. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this a mistake? Why would a man like Richard Hallstrom, whose calendar was booked with high-stakes meetings, want to have lunch with a maid? By 12:45 she was freshly dressed in her neatly pressed uniform, hair tied, hands slightly trembling. She arrived at the private dining room, tucked away behind the luxury lounge, where only VIPs and high-paying guests were ever invited. The hostess looked confused at first, then checked her list and nodded. Right this way, Miss Amara. When she entered, Richard was already seated, reviewing some papers. He looked up and smiled, not the corporate smile he wore during photo ops but something softer, warmer. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. Amara kept her composure. I wasn't sure I was supposed to. I've had 1,000 meetings this week, Richard said, setting the folder aside. And yet the most interesting person I've met so far doesn't even have a business card. She sat across from him. The table was set for two, the silverware glinting, the scent of roasted vegetables and herbs filling the room. He poured her a glass of sparkling water. I Googled you, he admitted. Amara raised an eyebrow. And? Nothing. You don't exist online. She smiled faintly. That's on purpose. Why? Because some stories aren't meant for the internet. He nodded slowly. You mentioned you studied in Rotterdam? Yes. Linguistics. But I had to drop out when my mother fell ill. And you've been in the US how long? 6 years. Cleaning rooms pays faster than translating textbooks. Richard leaned forward. But you didn't forget what you knew. No, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Knowledge doesn't leave you. It waits. That struck him more deeply than he expected. For a moment he was quiet. Then he gestured toward the piano in the corner of the room. Do you play? He asked. Amara glanced at it. Yes. Would you? She hesitated. Are you asking because you're curious, or because you're testing me? Richard tilted his head. Can't it be both? She stood slowly and walked to the piano. It had been years since she played, since university days when music was part of her daily escape. She ran her fingers gently along the keys. And then, without another word, she began to play. A classical piece, one her mother had loved. The notes floated across the room like silk, each one placed with care, emotion, precision. Richard's expression changed. His fingers stopped tapping. His lips parted slightly in disbelief. She didn't just play well. She played beautifully. Professionally. When she finished, she turned toward him, her face unreadable. Richard blinked as if waking from a trance. Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask, she replied gently. He let out a quiet, astonished laugh. Amara, what are you doing in a maid's uniform? She met his eyes. Waiting, she said simply. For someone to see me. And in that moment he did. Richard Hallstrom wasn't a man easily shaken. But ever since that moment in the executive dining room, his mind kept circling back to Amara's hands on the piano, to the precision of her words, and to the quiet strength in her presence. She was like no one he'd ever encountered, especially not in a world where wealth often overshadowed depth. Later that afternoon he called his assistant. I want her resume, he said. Whatever she's done before this. And if there isn't one, we help her write it. By evening, Amara had just finished tidying the last room on her new, unusually light schedule when she received a sealed envelope slipped under her locker door. Inside was a note, handwritten. Meet me at 9 a.m. in the West Wing Business Lounge. Dress casually. I owe you a better question this time. The next morning, Amara arrived in a simple cream blouse and black slacks. No uniform. No name tag. She found Richard seated alone in the lounge, a laptop open in front of him and a cup of coffee steaming beside it. He looked up and smiled. You came. You asked, she replied, sitting across from him. Richard closed the laptop and leaned in. I've spent years building companies, he began. Hiring graduates from Ivy League schools, investing in the brightest minds. But brilliance, real brilliance, it doesn't always come from those halls. Sometimes, it's hidden in people who've had to fight just to be seen. Amara remained quiet, her eyes locked on his. I want to offer you a job, he said. Her brows lifted. Doing what? Something worthy of you, he answered. You speak 5 languages fluently. You understand culture, nuance, and human behavior better than half the board members I sit with. I could use someone like that. In what role? Cultural advisor. Translator. Maybe even liaison for international development. We have partnerships coming up in Europe and Africa. You'd be perfect. Amara stared at him, trying to read the sincerity behind the offer. You want to take a hotel maid and turn her into an executive? I want to take a brilliant woman and give her back the life she was forced to abandon. She looked away for a second, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Why are you doing this, Richard? Because I know what it's like to be underestimated, he said softly. And because I've made mistakes, overlooked people, misjudged them. I'm trying to change that. Amara met his gaze again. Her voice was steady. I'm not a charity case. I know. You're an asset. Silence passed between them. Finally she asked, what would this job involve? We'll figure it out together, he said. Training, mentorship, a flexible contract. I'll connect you with people who can help. But you won't be picking up after strangers anymore. She leaned back in her chair, breath caught between disbelief and possibility. This isn't how things usually work, she murmured. No, he agreed. But maybe they should. Amara smiled then, small, cautious but real. I'll need to think about it. Take all the time you need. As she stood to leave, Richard added, one more thing. I wasn't mocking you when I asked you to play. I just didn't expect you to play like that. Amara turned over her shoulder. That's the thing about people like me, Mr. Hallstrom. We're full of surprises. And with that she walked out, leaving behind the role of a maid, and stepping into a future that no longer fit within 4 hotel walls. The hotel was a place of routine, polished smiles, scripted greetings and tightly run schedules. So when something unusual happened, the ripples spread quickly. And Amara's sudden shift from uniformed maid to casually dressed guest in the West Wing did not go unnoticed. By noon the next day the staff break room buzzed with speculation. Did you see her yesterday? Whispered Lena, a front desk clerk. She walked right into the business lounge with Hallstrom himself. Wearing heels. She probably spilled wine on his shirt or something, someone muttered. No, said Jerome, a bellhop. He's talking about flying her out for work. Real work. Something about Europe? Since when do billionaires promote maids? Amara could feel the stares. The glances. The half-smiles that weren't quite kind. Elevators fell silent when she stepped in. Conversations changed when she walked by. Back in the staff locker room, she overheard a few voices in the next aisle. She acts all humble, but don't be fooled. She's just another one of those girls who gets lucky and forgets where she came from. She was always too smart for this place anyway. The words stung more than she expected. Later that afternoon she ran into Ms. Collins, the head of housekeeping. The same woman who'd given her that first chance when Amara arrived in the U.S., wide-eyed and broke. I heard, Ms. Collins said, arms folded, eyes sharp. So you're leaving us? I haven't made a decision yet, Amara replied quietly. Collins stepped closer. You were one of the best. Always respectful, always on time. But people talk, Amara. Be careful. Power makes folks nervous. I didn't ask for this. You didn't have to. Sometimes just being extraordinary is enough to make others uncomfortable. Amara nodded. Thank you. For everything. But not all the whispers were bitter. One of the younger maids, Nia, found her folding laundry that evening. Is it true? She asked, eyes wide with hope. Amara smiled gently. What have you heard? That Mr. Hallstrom's offering you a real job. That you're leaving. I'm considering it. Nia bit her lip. You think someone like me could ever be noticed like that? Amara looked at her, really looked. A girl with tired eyes but a sharp mind. If you keep growing, keep learning and never forget your worth, yes. Absolutely. For a moment, Nia's face lit up like a candle. That night, Amara sat alone on the hotel rooftop, watching the city lights below. She thought of her mother's long nights working 2 jobs. Of her old classmates back in Rotterdam who had finished their degrees, while she scrubbed sinks. She thought of Richard's offer, and the way her own voice had finally echoed in a room filled with power. It wasn't just about escaping cleaning shifts and rude guests. It was about taking back control of her story. But she also knew, this next chapter would come with more eyes, more judgment and more pressure than ever before. And still she didn't feel afraid. Because for the first time in years, she was being seen not for her scars, her silence, or her uniform, but for her potential. Tomorrow she would give Richard her answer. But tonight she allowed herself a small, private celebration. Amara's decision didn't come with a dramatic announcement or a formal letter. She simply walked into Richard Hallstrom's office the next morning, took a deep breath and said, I'm ready. Richard didn't ask her to explain. He simply stood, extended his hand and said, let's begin. Over the next few weeks, her world transformed. The first change was her badge. No longer plastic with a barcode, but engraved with her full name and the title. Cultural Liaison, International Development. She had an office, a sleek desk, a company laptop, and a mentor who gave her space to grow, but never let her feel lost. Richard wasn't just offering a job, he was investing in her. She was enrolled in 2 accelerated executive training programs. One in international relations and another in cross-cultural communications. The company flew her to New York for a global summit, where she interpreted in real time between Dutch, French, and English dignitaries. She moved with grace and precision, commanding attention with the kind of presence that didn't need to shout to be heard. By month 3, she was sitting in meetings with ambassadors and international clients. Not as a token, not as a curiosity, but as someone who belonged there. At one particularly high-stakes conference in Geneva, a French delegate leaned toward Richard during a break and whispered, "Where did you find her? She speaks like a diplomat and thinks like a strategist." Richard smiled. She was always this. The world's just catching up. But not everything was easy. Amara faced skepticism, especially from other executives. Men twice her age with expensive degrees and sharp suits often questioned her presence. One such moment came during a boardroom presentation when a senior VP interrupted her. I'm sorry, Ms. Okoro, could we let one of our more experienced analysts walk us through the cultural risk assessment?" Amara didn't flinch. "With respect," she replied, her voice calm but firm, "I created this report based on first-hand knowledge of the region and 3 language translations. If there's a specific error you found, I'd love to address it." Silence followed. Richard gave her a nod, quiet and proud. She was not just performing, she was leading. Meanwhile, back at the hotel, word of Amara's rise continued to spread. Some rolled their eyes. Others watched in awe. But one thing was undeniable. Her story was no longer just whispered between rooms, it was inspiring. Nia, the young maid, began taking evening classes. Jerome applied for a front desk internship. Even Miss Collins, proud and stern as ever, posted Amara's feature in the company newsletter on the staff bulletin board. "Hard work isn't always seen," she wrote beneath the photo, "but when it is, it changes everything." Despite her new life, Amara never distanced herself from her past. She donated a portion of her salary each month to fund education grants for immigrant women. She visited her old housekeeping team with lunch once a month. And she always made time to talk, to the janitor, the kitchen porter, the night shift cleaner. Because she knew. She knew what it felt like to be invisible. She knew the hunger of dreams deferred. And now that she was finally standing on a bigger stage, she made one thing very clear. She wasn't climbing the ladder to escape her story. She was lifting the whole ladder with her. From the quiet corners of a hotel hallway to the grand halls of international boardrooms, Amara's story proved something the world often forgets. Greatness isn't limited by uniform, background, or social status. It can be hidden in the unnoticed, the overlooked, the silent. Sometimes, it just needs one moment, one voice, one chance to be seen. What started as a routine day for a maid ended up changing not only her life, but the perspectives of everyone around her, including a billionaire who thought he'd seen it all. Richard Hallstrom had hired countless advisors, consultants, and analysts over the years, but it was a soft-spoken woman in a maid's apron who reminded him what true brilliance looked like: humble, unshaken, and deeply rooted in lived experience. But Amara didn't take the spotlight for herself. She used it to shine on others, to uplift, to open doors, and to rewrite the narrative that people like her don't belong in boardrooms or belong behind podiums. She proved that intelligence comes in many forms and that accents, scars, and past jobs don't define your future. To those who mocked her when she bent to pick up towels, and to those who doubted her when she stood up to speak Dutch on a casual phone call, Amara didn't offer revenge, she offered results. She didn't shout to prove her worth. She let her excellence speak for her. And perhaps that's the quiet revolution this world needs. If you've ever felt unseen or unheard, if you've ever been underestimated because of where you work or how you speak, remember Amara. Her story is a reminder that your value doesn't diminish just because others fail to recognize it. Sometimes all it takes is courage to be yourself, even when no one's watching. Because eventually someone will notice. And when they do, be ready. Thank you for watching this powerful story from Dream Tale, where we share inspiring stories that remind us of the hidden strength in everyday people. If this story touched your heart or made you see someone differently, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. Leave a comment below. What would you have done in Amara's shoes? You never know who might be inspired just by reading your words. Until next time, stay kind, stay humble, and never underestimate the silent strength of those around you.